Alright, so there's a lot to unpack in this video, but basically we're creating a separate machine that will establish a VPN, and that's all that machine's gonna do. It's just gonna serve whatever we want to push through that VPN. Any traffic or internet traffic on that machine will always go out through the VPN. If the VPN breaks or doesn't establish connection, no traffic will go out. That's the definition of a kill switch. I have a lot to go over about setting up this machine, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. Now, before we jump on the desktop, I just want to let you know I do stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday over on Twitch. There's my address. Go ahead, pop over, follow me, whatever. If you want to ask any questions with me live, feel free. I love just kind of hanging out over there. Sometimes I do distro installs. Other times I might just be playing a game on Linux. But regardless, I always love people to stop by and chat. But with all that said, let's go ahead and jump on our desktop and get this thing done. Okay, let's start this off by installing packages on a fresh server. So I'm using Ubuntu server. This is probably the easiest method. If you're unfamiliar with Linux servers and you want to set up a VPN box, I'd probably recommend it as it is the easiest to start from. Even though I kind of hate on Ubuntu from time to time, the ease of use on their server system is really simple. And we'll come into our server. I've already logged in. I'm actually set up as root, so I don't even need sudo before this. I've already installed OpenVPN in UFW. If you haven't, make sure you run this command. Also, make sure you set a static IP. So if we do an IP space A, you'll notice that my IP address is set to 192.68.69.55. We don't want this to ever change, and that's why we pick something kind of obscure outside of our range that other computers can get. The DHCP range is what it's called. But definitely take note of this whole thing. This first portion is your actual IP address. The -24 is your net mask. But just know what this is and make sure it's static. When you're installing Ubuntu server, there's an option to say static IP. Set it there. And if you don't know, past that, I made a separate video about how to actually use NetPlan and other things with Ubuntu Server 18 and beyond. If you're on Ubuntu Server 16, it's a little different, but either way, all of them work. Very, very easy to set up. But we have a static IP, we've installed our OpenVPN in UFW, and we're ready to proceed. All the cheat sheet for this video is actually going to be on christitus.com. If you look, I made a VPN Kill Switch server page. This is actually christitus.com/VPN Kill Switch. A link is in the description if you're curious. So with that, we've done the install of packages. The static IP is set. If you did forget to set it, you can always use Network Manager UI. This is really an easy way to do it if you have Network Manager installed, but I just set that in here just so if you don't want to hunt around and you want the easy method, that's kind of how I do it. But it just depends. Second, download your OVPN files. I did this on a prior video, but any VPN provider has their own OVPN files. Make sure you download them, move them to etc OpenVPN. So when we've downloaded the OVPN file, we're going to actually put it as a .conf file. So let's go over to our server. This is the server we're actually running as root right now. We'll go to etc OpenVPN. We'll do a listing. Actually, we'll do a long listing. And you'll see we have a .secrets file. And the only thing in that .secrets file is a username in line 1 and then a password in line 2. No other syntax or anything involved there. Just copy and paste your username and password in there, and that's it. There's no other words or anything else in there. So I'm not going to actually open that up because that is my actual username and password, and it is set to chmod 600, so only root can read it. That's very important to secure that information. And then here's our OVPN files. Now let's go ahead and change this up. We're going to move Express, which is our main server, to dallas.conf. And we're changing it to a .conf file for a reason for our service creation. So let's go ahead and do that. Do a long listing again, and you'll see that we now have those files in our directory. And if we look at the actual what's inside this .conf file, you'll see that This is the remote server we're connecting through on ExpressVPN. It's using port 1195. That's very important to notate the port because we need to be opening up that port to establish the connection. So remember that. And then the only other line I change here is really just to add the .secrets, which has our username and pass in it. So that's the only things I change in the OVPN file that we have renamed to .conf. So we'll go ahead, close that out, and we're ready to make our service. So to make the service, it's actually even simpler. So we'll just do a system control, and then we're going to start open VPN at Dallas, and this should read that .conf file and launch into our VPN. So it looks like it launched. Let's do another system control and check the status to make sure it didn't improperly terminate or exit. And you'll see that it is active and running. The last line here says initialization sequence completed. This is very important. So we actually are established through our tunnel now, which is great. So we know this service and these commands work. We can enable it on startup by simply, we've done a start, we've done a status, now we just do enable. And this enables it, so every time our computer reboots, it starts up our OpenVPN. So now the VPN's starting automatically, everything's right with the world. Let's go ahead and move on to the next step. So going back to our cheat sheet, we need to secure the system by disabling IPv6 and doing some other tweaks here. Let's go ahead and go into this right here, the nano system control file, and let's take a peek and see what's in there. From here, we got a lot of different options, and that's it. And then we're gonna add all of this down here, and you can see these commands right in here. So very, very cool. You'll notice I added E0 onto this one, and that comes into play here in a minute. Now we need to verify that and basically reload our system control just to make sure IPv6 gets disabled. So going back over to our cheat sheet, it says use system control -P. So we'll do sys control -P, and it goes ahead and reloads all that stuff. So you'll see all the rules in here. Pay close attention to disable IPv6. Make sure all these are 1. So I like to do that. And then we're just going to cat, which is basically just reading this disable IPv6 file to verify it is disabled. And it is 1, which is good. If this is 0, it means IPv6 is not disabled. Now, one other extra check I like to do is do a sys control all and grepping all the IPv6 commands. So let's grep all, and you'll notice all of them are 1. That's what you want. Now let's say one of these is not 1, and it says disable IPv6 and it says 0. Now I did this initially through my first run through, and I found one that wasn't, and it was this guy right here. It said equals 0. So what I did was just copy that and pasted it into my systemcontrol.conf and enable it .1. You'll see that right here as the last rule loaded. So it was just something that was missed during one of my setups, but I just wanted to go back and verify. So that's why I verify in all these different methods to make sure that IPv6 is disabled. All right, so from here, we've got everything pretty much set up except for the firewall. So we'll go ahead and set up UFW. First off, you need to make sure it's disabled. Since we're running as root, we can just go UFW, but if you're not running as root, definitely do sudo UFW. You can do status to see what's going on with it, but we're gonna just do UFW disable. So it is stopped, and now we can actually edit UFW. First thing we need to do is change the UFW file to not allow or touch IPv6. Make sure you change this from yes to no right at the very beginning. Control O to write out, enter, and Control X to exit. Second, we make sure we add our local area network using these commands, and block all incoming and outgoing traffic by default using these 2 commands. And then we simply whitelist our VPN port. By default, 1194 is the VPN port, but earlier you remember how I highlighted ExpressVPN actually uses 1195 and protocol or proto UDP. That's typically what it is. So that's the default, but make sure you don't forget the proto UDP. That's very important. And then we whitelist the entire VPN tunnel, meaning everything out and everything in allow from ton 0. And then we come back and enable the firewall. So once we've got all these in, one thing to look at, on some systems, your firewall will, or your actual VPN tunnel may not be ton 0. So check IP space A, make sure it's ton 0, but it could vary. So you might need to change that up, and it could be like 1 or 2, or sometimes it branches off a little bit and changes the naming scheme depending on the distribution. So verify this with IP space A, UFW, enable, and go ahead and hit yes, and then UFW status to verify all the rules. So if you don't know what a rule is, and it's not part of these and they're just added, I highly recommend removing them and seeing what happens. Obviously, take backups and things before that, but if there is, let's say, a specific rule in here you wanted to remove, you can do a UFW status numbered, and then it numbers all your rules. And then if there's a specific rule where you're like, you know what, I don't like that rule, like that UDP 1195 in, you can just do UFW delete and then just type 6, and it'll get rid of this rule right here. So just a pro tip, just to get you by on UFW. But with that all configured, it back and enabled, everything looks good. You can go ahead and double check by just doing sudo, or actually, let's go ahead and get out of root. And we're just going to do an curl ifconfig.me. We get 193.56, which is an external IP address. So I'm not giving out my IP address here, obviously. So the VPN is connected. But I also like to test bringing it down and then trying to ping Google. So let's ping Google. You'll see that it is going out. Ping times are pretty good, about 40 milliseconds, nothing bad there. And then let's go ahead and do a sudo system control stop open VPN at express. That stops our VPN tunnel, and now the VPN is down. And if I do a curl ifconfig, it should actually error out and not even return anything, because there's nothing for it to go out and actually curl, because it's blocking all internet traffic. And as you see, it's not returning an IP address, so we can cancel out of that. So we know this is working, and we can simply restart. Let's ping Google. Help if you spell ping correctly. And you'll see we're pinging Google. We'll do curl ifconfig me. And we have an external IP. So we are on the VPN. Everything's set up. Next, I want to configure a transmission daemon. So if we do sudo apt install transmission daemon, and you'll see it's actually already installed, but we need to stop this once it's installed and do some configuration. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll go ahead and do a sudo system control stop transmission. With that stopped, we can easily go in and edit the configuration file. There's a couple things we need to go ahead and change in here. So it's actually a settings.json file. So right here, we'll have all of this stuff. So the first thing on here, I'm going to walk through what you would change from default. Block list, I always never rely on two different, I always rely on at least 2, maybe 3 or 4 different ways to secure a connection. I always say, hey, you got VPN, you got Tor, you got all these things. Block list is just another method to help protect yourself. I use iblocklist.com. They're not affiliate, just go to iblocklist.com and you'll be able to do that. I'm a subscriber, you don't have to. And we just go over to lists. Subscription based, you can get a little bit of extra stuff. And the reason why I like to subscribe is you can go into my list and then go ahead and select multiples, and it culls it into one string. So this little string here under level 1, you can just copy it, and you'll see it has this cool little feature. So we copy that list, we come back into our file, and we would just paste this blacklist URL right into there. With this new URL under the blacklist URL, it would download everything from level 1, And if you don't want to go ahead and go the extra mile and get everything on the block list, you don't have to. I just like to do it because it blocks some really cool stuff on the subscription model. But you know, hey, it's up to you. Like piracy and some government stuff, and it's just some really good stuff in here as far as ads and trackers and other things that I like. I block list, but pick your poison. There's a bunch of different block lists, and if you're not going to pick anyone and you just want to grab one, grab the level one here. It's free from Blue Track. So with that done, next up is to specify your downloads directory. Now I think by default this puts it in a pretty obscure directory. I like to map this to a different directory under media downloads. So that's what I've done and changed that. Incomplete directory, you can go ahead and change this or leave it blank. It doesn't matter. I have it not enabled anyways, but just something. The rest of these just leave as stock default settings. There's an RPC password, which you can go ahead and change. So you can change this to 1234, and then it'll go ahead and change that. Other cool aspects of this is you can come into actually here and specify a username. I put usually admin. You actually can probably disable authentication altogether to not have any kind of auth, and then you can just log into this website. And then the port I usually always leave there. Now, one last thing on this configuration file, you need to go under RPC whitelist enabled, true. Make sure that you change this to true and you add your range. So by default, I think 127, the local host, is in here, but you want to go ahead and make a comma and then put in 192.168.69 or .1 is what most people will have in here, and then an asterisk. This says anything on my local subnet can access this. So from here, we just write this out, and we're ready to connect up to this and see what all's there. Now, obviously, before we pop over to the browser, we need to make sure we start this transmission daemon. So we'll go ahead and hit start, and now we're ready to actually go over and check it out. So we're going to go over to the browser now, and from here, we'll log in using this IP, which is the 6955:9091. You notice that port that was in the settings file, we just put that in, and then it goes ahead and autofills all this last part after that. So once that's done, we'll come down into here, and you'll notice this blank page with this little folder. And you can actually upload torrent files, which is really, really cool, or just enter in a URL. So let's go and download Arch Linux torrent. So we'll go Arch Linux torrent, and you'll see this magnet link. The magnet link, we can just copy the link and come back into here and paste it. We'll go ahead and hit upload. And this goes out, grabs the Arch Linux ISO, through the transmission daemon. It's all connected through VPN, which is pretty awesome. And then it downloads it. It's pretty darn fast. So I always pick ExpressVPN because of the speed. And you'll see it's a little bit better than your average VPN. I know with private internet access, I was usually hovering around 1.5 or so and go. Now, I am running into a permission denied here. Let me go ahead and change this and we'll restart. All right, so I got my permissions issue worked out here, and it is now downloading. Now, this is the one thing I really like about ExpressVPN compared to like private internet access and some other VPNs I used, was the download speed. I'm able to get a good download speed. I'm actually getting 5 to 6 megabytes, and sometimes even up to 10, depending on the server, but it is just flying along on this VPN. You wouldn't think that I get these kinds of speeds on a VPN, but I absolutely love it for the actual speed of it. So overall, now that I got my permissions issues worked out, it is working perfectly fine. Just be careful of where you actually write this file to. If you change your download directory, make sure that Debian-transmission, that group, is assigned ownership of that folder. Otherwise, it will not be able to read and write to it, and you'll get those permission issues. So make sure you assign that user, and From here, we now have a box we can use torrents from our actual main machine, and we just go to our little web address, and there we go. You can also do other cool stuff, such as X11 forwarding that I already mentioned, but this is a good way to get on your VPN, secure it down, have a very minimal footprint of what you're pushing through your VPN. You know exactly what's going in and out of it, and you don't have to worry about a program sidetracking and going ahead and dropping the VPN and then going out, because it's all isolated in this one box. So a very, very good way of doing a VPN, and that's one of the big powers of having like a little Linux box or a Linux server. I would recommend a Raspberry Pi to do this type of setup. This type of setup is very, very easy. And honestly, it's just so great on a little $40 Pi. So if you do want this type of setup, you can do it on a Raspberry Pi. I've actually done it on a Pi for over a couple years. I had one just kind of laying, chilling inside. And then when I built the studio and I got the 42U rack and a bunch of extra computers, I was like, all right, there's no point in having a Raspberry Pi anymore. But it's still a very good tool that everyone can put in their skill set. And if you're a Windows user, it's very easy to learn Linux on that Pi, and a really good break-in period, and you can utilize it for really fun projects like this. And that was setting up a VPN kill switch. Very, very kind of complicated in some spots, and it's something that a lot of people struggle with, but it is very, very powerful. And if you're going to utilize a VPN for doing whatever it is you want to do through a VPN, I like this segmented, compartmentalized section. Some of the best security professionals in the world deal with compartmentalization, and I think if you're going to do VPNs as some form of secure communication, definitely compartmentalize it. I think too many people just hit an app sitting on their desktop, connect to their VPN, and then do what they want to do on the VPN, and I think that's just silly. I think compartmentalizing it in this kill box really, really helps things, and it makes it very clean. So I use it mainly just for downloading torrents and other things like that, and I never have to worry about that coming through my main connection without it hitting my VPN provider first, which it just kind of puts your mind at ease, which is nice. I also can, if I want to securely browse through a VPN or have my traffic originate from another area, just launching a Firefox instance through X11 forwarding is very powerful as well. And again, there's no connecting or any of that. It just always runs in the background. I never have to worry about it. So that's why I did it this method. Again, check out a Raspberry Pi solution for setting up a secondary machine, specifically like I did in this video. The Pi is probably the easiest entry level with only about 50, 60 bucks, and anybody can pretty much do this, which is very, very powerful. But with all that said, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. This took me all day to do. It was such a pain in the butt because I kept running into some issues here and there. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. And with that said, thank you to all my patrons. Without you, I couldn't make videos like this one, and I'll see you in the next one.